Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. I am a relationship and dating coach, energy interventionist, acupuncturist, and a dude just trying to figure out what this life on this planet means. The show has an email account. Have you emailed me yet? Tell me what you like, what you don't like. How did you feel about the weather conversation? That's what I've heard from the most from you guys so far. Hit me up at pleasurepointspodcast@gmail.com. That's pleasurepointspodcast@gmail. Also, this episode is brought to you by the Oilgram. At the Oilgram, it is Jennifer's Instagram where she is disseminating all of her doTERRA knowledge. So if you are interested in essential oils to improve your health and wellness, improve your fertility, pregnancy, post-pregnancy, just general, all good vibes, check her out at the Oilgram to get all of your essential oil questions answered and to get you hooked up with the best essential oils out there in the world. Today's podcast, I'm joined by my very good friend, Mark Krassner. Mark is an amazing guy who founded a company called Expectful. You can check them out at Instagram at Expectful. It's an app where they have meditations to support all phases of pregnancy and delivery and post-delivery. He's doing really remarkable things. We had a great conversation talking about meditation, mindfulness, men's groups, dating, love, relationships. We covered a lot of ground. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Without further ado, please welcome Mark Krassner to the show. Oh, you can check him out also on Instagram at Mark Krassner. All right, let's cue the music and on with the show. All right, and we're live. What's up, Mark?
What's up, Jim?
Thanks for coming by.
Good to be here, man.
Dude, I'm like buzzing. We just did some Qigong beforehand. You were like, let's meditate before the podcast. We just crushed it.
So good. Can you call that the bone marrow cleansing?
Yeah, it's called the bone marrow cleansing. It's a phenomenal sequence of Qigong. What was your experience? What'd you think?
Oh my gosh. I guess the whole thing is I stopped thinking when it was happening. I just felt a lot of energy moving through my body. It's really powerful. I felt so connected to the earth and I felt so grounded and centered with the practice. And the reason we did it is I was asking Jim about Qigong. A good buddy of mine, Matt Hunter, recommended this thing called the 8 brocades, which Jim, maybe you could speak more to.
Go ahead.
But it seems to be this pretty standard practice. It's supposed to help with longevity that I've been trying on for a few weeks, and it's been fantastic. I've just been really enjoying it. So Jim just opened up it's a whole new thing for me with this new pose or this new sequence that he taught me, which is awesome. Yeah.
So the 8 brocades is like, it's a classic Qigong sequence. And a brocade is, it's like a fine piece of silk or fabric. So the reason I call it the 8 brocades is that if you do these 8 movements every day, it's like adorning yourself in the finest energetic fabric that there is. Yeah, I was telling you before the podcast started that, God forbid if I were to get sick, and God came down and was like, you get one choice of a modality to heal yourself. You could do chemo, radiation, surgery, acupuncture, diet, massage, but you can only choose one. What do you choose? I'm choosing Qigong. Because there's something about, I love the intentionality behind it where it has a way of focusing your energy, and the whole idea is like an internal martial art. So it helps you to cultivate that internal sense of chi, and having that kind of direct experience, I just think is so valuable, especially when it comes to healing, because to do a practice like that, you're asking yourself a lot of things. You're saying, I want to get in touch with my energy. I want to move my energy, and I am going to be a motive force for my own healing. And something like, surgery or acupuncture, some of these modalities are a bit more passive. And I think that especially if someone's really sick, taking an active engagement like that is really important.
Totally. Also starting your day with some form of that. I mean, I found that that's been so huge for me to wake up and just get in touch with my breath and my body. It just changes the whole day. I had a friend once say to me that he had this saying, either you get on top of the day or the day gets on top of you. And so bringing Qigong at the beginning of the day or any kind of breath work or contemplative work has been such a gift.
I remember I was just reminded of a story when we were doing the bone marrow cleansing. I used to teach Qigong on the beach when I was in Miami. I was working for Canyon Ranch, and the director of fitness was like, dude, you got to teach Qigong. I was like, I am not qualified to teach Qigong. I was like, I know it from some of the classes that I took in school, but I'm not like one of these masters who's been doing it for 30 years. And he's like, well, we're in Miami Beach, and so you're the only one around. Like, we need you to teach the class. And so I used to teach it on the beach. And this one day I was doing the bone marrow cleansing, and I saw this woman just, when we did the yang expansion part, she just started crying. And she came up to me afterwards and she said that she had been going through cancer treatments and the chemo and the radiation. I think she was like 6 months out from that. And when we did that expansion part of that practice, it was the first time that she felt free since her diagnosis.
Wow.
So cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. These things, like, that's the thing I feel like a lot of people don't know about these modalities that exist that could just be so helpful in life, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if anybody's listening and interested, you don't need a gym on the beach. YouTube is a great source. There's this guy in YouTube, I just searched the 8 brocades, Qigong, and there's a bunch of videos. I watch one, it's 10 minutes, and a guy named Jake Mace, who looks like one of the villains in The Karate Kid. Black pants, white shirt.
Sweep the leg.
Park. Yeah, exactly. Put him in a body bag, Johnny. Who does this. So it's like, if anybody has any interest based on this conversation, it's easy to find for you.
Yeah. The Lee Holden is also great. He's got some great videos. He's had a whole like PBS sequence. I like his stuff. His stuff is very beginner friendly. There's also a couple, Francesco Garapoli, I think, and his wife, though I don't know if they're together anymore. They have a great video sequence. It's a little bit longer. It's a little bit more complicated, but it's also very, very nice. And then the bone marrow cleansing, who did that? The guy wrote a book called Qigong. I can't remember his name. I don't think it was Bob Flaws, but you can find it. There's like a video of some white dude dressed up in the traditional garb.
Isn't that cultural appropriation though?
Yeah, probably.
Oh
probably,
my gosh.
Yeah. The nerve. Yeah, I'm just like feeling buzzed. It's nice.
It really is. Really is. So before we sat down to record, we were talking about a lot of interesting things. We were talking about men's work.
Oh yeah.
Spirituality. There's so many different things we could talk about here. But maybe men's work's a good place to start. Or...
Sure. Yeah, perfect. Well, why don't you talk about how you got into it?
Sure. So there's this organization called Everyman, and they started with the purpose of simplifying men's work in a way that it's really easy for people to understand so they could bring it into their lives and their communities. And there's a group of guys that I know and respect who started doing it. It's 8 of them, and they're part of my community, and we're just emphatic about how it was changing their lives and the results that they'd seen and the breakthroughs that they'd had. And the same friend who introduced me to Qigong, Matt, went to a weekend workshop that Everyman had and came out and said, I want to start a men's group. Mark, would you be part of it? I said, sure. So we pulled a bunch of guys together. And after a few months, it became 8 of us. And the whole practice that we're involved in is getting together for the purpose of getting in touch with our emotions. We're not allowed to give each other advice. It's just simply we're there to share whatever we're feeling, and not just share it, but experience what we're feeling. And the men are there to be present to that and to encourage a greater sense of depth within those emotions. And just like the theory is just like yoga or meditation or tennis, whatever it is, there's a practice to those things that you can get better at. And the theory is that as men, you generally speaking, if you're a typical man who grew up in Western society, you haven't been really trained to feel your emotions. In fact, you've been encouraged to do the very opposite of that. And so the whole purpose of this work is to actually create a practice around getting in touch with your emotions and feeling them and experiencing them and letting them out. And it's been such a remarkable thing. I mean, the different changes that I've seen happen in my life and in the lives of the men around me has been so profound just by creating a safe space for people to say, to really get in touch with that anger or sadness or fear or joy, which society hasn't really created space for too typically in the past.
Were you feeling a need to be in a men's group, or was it just an opportunity that Matt presented to you?
It was an opportunity that was resonant, though. There was something inside me that I think before that I was more wanting maybe an older mentor, somebody who could really, a strong male presence that could really guide me in certain ways. But when the men's group came around, and because of the enthusiasm with which other people that were part of them spoke about them with, it was like really, I jumped at the opportunity.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you find that it's difficult for you or men in the group to not give advice? Are there times where people have to be like, yo, dude, that's more advicey, like, let's just honor our brother for where he's at?
That's a good question. The group's gotten to a point where that doesn't happen, or it hasn't happened in many sessions, just because I think it's been about a year now, so we're pretty steeped in it. What will happen a lot, which I think is helpful, sometimes advice can be helpful. I really respect the guys I'm in this group with, so if somebody has something to share with me, usually they'll share it after. It's like, oh, I really want to speak to you about this. Let's take it offline. And then maybe we'll stroll for a while after the group breaks up at night. And, but it's been really good. And it's amazing how I think advice, when somebody gives advice, a lot of times there can be an inherent, like, I know better, or you're not doing it right, or, something like that could be challenging for people and not create a safe environment for them to feel their emotions. So leaving advice out has been such a huge, I think, aspect of our ability to really go to the depths of our emotions in the group. Yeah. And it's been fascinating. It's a double-edged sword, because in doing this work with these men, I've found that I have gone so deep within myself, but a lot of times stuff will surface that's challenging and traumatic that'll take me some time to work through. So it's been a really interesting process of doing this work and seeing how it fits into my life. But it's just been so powerful to watch everybody shift and change and transform just by being together and sharing their emotions. It's the simplest thing.
What's the biggest shift that you've noticed for yourself?
For me, it's been around feeling empowered in my life and feeling self-expressed in my life. I had this feeling, and I don't think it's an uncommon thing that men experience, but a lot of times I think I had more fear of men, and I had more fear of groups. And I think we live in this society where there's this sense of the dominant theme in culture is that I will take from you, and I will look out for myself, and things of that nature. And I think I personally sense that walking around in the world is a sense of not necessarily being able to trust men. And I once heard this quote, I don't know who said it, my girlfriend Alana shared it with me, and it's that women don't, when they pass each other in the street, don't necessarily feel the need to like nod at each other, but men do, because we sort of have to show men that we mean them no harm. Otherwise, there's this inherent thing where you might assume that one does. So getting comfortable in a group of men and being able to like see everybody's vulnerability, being able to trust these guys, but also seeing that, the guys in my group, I have a lot of respect for. They're up to, by most people's yardstick, they're successful and charismatic and up to things in the world and respectable people, people they admire, really. And it's been so amazing to see these guys that you wouldn't maybe think had a problem or insecurity in the world be in a room with me up against some insecurities, deep insecurities that live inside of them. And it's been so fascinating to see men just grapple with this stuff, and for me to understand that I'm not the only one who might deal with insecurities or challenges in my life, and that they're very common. We're all fighting a battle, no matter how confident somebody might seem on the outside.
That's so huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
We were talking, I was involved in some men's groups at a very young age when I was like 16 and 17 years old. And I just remember seeing these men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who were experiencing feeling for the first time. And I could see through their faces the pain of stifling it, the pain of growing up with a story that says it's not safe to share yourself. Who you are is unsafe in the world. And I got to see the damage that had. And so I'm so grateful to have received some of this mentoring on basically what I guess we would call now sort of emotional intelligence at such a young age. And there is something about being in these groups, and especially like beyond just a weekend, whether it's the weekly follow-ups, where you get to ride the waves with some of these men. And when people get more vulnerable, it's been easier for me to then go out into the world. And if I see harm or I see someone treating someone else like not very nice, to be like, well, they're suffering, they're hurting too, or if it happens to me, if someone does something or whatever, it just be like, that person's in pain and they don't know another way to do it right now. That was the best that they could do. But it's like, I know what it's like to be in pain. And I've seen I've been in situations where I get to support people who are also in pain. And I think that's just so important, because if you're living just on social media and you see everyone who's like, well, everyone looks great, why am I the one who's like, wants to stay in and saying horrible things to myself?
Totally. Totally, dude. That's the thing. It's like things are really can be set up against us. You know? I really think that we have to work hard in today's society to be in a place where we could be happy. I don't think we can, the average person, maybe some people like my girlfriend Alana, for example, maybe I know a few people who have that baseline just set where their baseline will be happiness. And I think we all can have that baseline in the right environment. I think that is who we are. But I think at least I'm speaking as a 35-year-old guy living in New York City or Brooklyn. I really think that I have to actively do things to make sure that my mind is working in a way that is really serving me and not my enemy, and things like Qigong and things like men's work and things like seeing social media for what it is or limiting intake of that can really help, because the way things are set up is like you were talking about social. It's just like, if you're stressed, it's not because there's something wrong with you, it's because you're human. And the way things are set up right now, I really think that cultivating a state of mind where you can see the world with glass half full with the kind of compassion that you're talking about is something that we really need to cultivate and take into our own hands. I'm
reminded of I was an anthropology major in college, and I remember this story of these Aborigines that when they would meet for the first time, when the men would meet, instead of shaking hands, they would actually grab the other person's dick. They'd like shake dicks, It's like the ultimate in disarming and like, we're okay. I'm not going to hurt
Seriously,
you.
I've had the opportunity. I didn't take it.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
wow.
Men feel the need to nod. That's good.
Totally. Yeah, it feels very bonobo.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just like their whole society revolves around like genital touching and stuff like that. But I don't know, maybe there's something to that,
Yeah. Start the revolution.
Not here, man. Sorry, brother. But it's a good food for thought.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. One of the stories, when I first met you, I was like, how did Kelly Slater end up in this kitchen? Because you looked an awful lot like Kelly Slater. That was my first thought. And then we started talking about it. You started saying, like, oh man, I just shaved my head like not too long ago. And like, people have been, someone else had confused you for Kelly Slater, asked if you were him or whatever. But if you would, could you tell a story about like what led to that and the whole relationship with your hair?
Yeah, absolutely. So my hair, long history of bald men in my family on mom and dad's side. So I was sort of destined for that. And my hair started thinning in my mid-20s. And I started taking Propecia, which is a pharmaceutical that does something in your body to help you keep your hair. What it also does is it can significantly reduce your sex drive and start to mess with your memory and damage your organs and things like that. I didn't know that when I started taking it. I just heard it could maybe diminish my sex drive. So I started taking that, and I started taking Rogaine, right? Or applying Rogaine in my head every morning. And I was able to keep my hair. And it was all good. And after a while, I ended up getting off Propecia because I started to not feel right after a few years on it. I knew something was wrong. So I said, oh man. So I got a Propecia, but it was an insecure feeling to get off it because there was fear that could lose my hair not taking that. And as a man, my hair was so tied to my identity. And I led love and acceptance from others. My look, I think everyone's looks can be, but I think for me as a man, specifically my hair was really such a big, big thing. And so I got up Propecia and I continued to take Rogaine for years and years and years. And almost 2 years ago now, I sat in a circle where for 3 days I did something called combo. And for those of you that don't know what combo is it's poison that gets extracted from the back of a frog, the poison it would let off to protect itself from predators. People found a way to extract from the frog. And that basically what happens is I drank a few liters of water, had little holes singed into my skin, and the combo medicine or poison, however you want to, people call it medicine or poison, it's both, got applied to my skin. And then what happened is I let it work through my system. And eventually my body went, oh, what is this in my system? This should not be here. This is poison. And I ended up purging. And the idea is that when you purge and this stuff is in your system, you're not just getting rid of the poison, your body is basically evacuating everything from it that's not pure. And it's looking for anything that doesn't belong there and just saying out, out, out. And so I did this, and on the first day that I did it, and to preface this, I'm a clean eater. As far as wellness goes, I pay a lot of attention to it. So I meditate a lot, I eat really well. I'm very conscious of the things that I put into my body. When I purged for the first time, the stuff that came out of me tasted like burnt metallic plastic. And the water that was inside me, it turned like black.
Wow.
It was gross.
Wow.
And I remember looking down, I had a bucket, and I looked down, and sorry if this is graphic for the listeners here, but I looked down at this bucket and I saw that what had come out of me, and I said, what is that? How is this in my system? How is there something that tastes like burnt metallic plastic inside of me? And the only way I could make sense of that was as Rogaine, because it was the only thing that unnatural that I was putting into my body.
Wow.
And over the next 2 days, I continued to, I did 2 more ceremonies and continued to purge, felt consequently better and better each time. What's cool about combo is it's sort of like the opposite of how drinking works or a hangover works, because you suffer, the first thing you do is suffer, and then you get great feelings afterwards, where
Wow.
when you drink, if you enjoy alcohol, you maybe get a buzz, and then later you feel like shit. But it's pretty cool to have that reversed. And after the 3rd day, I felt like I'd upgraded maybe like a Mustang for a Porsche.
Wow.
I felt amazing. And
are you still purging? Like when you do it? Like
all 3 days?
All 3 days?
Yeah, generally.
So it induces a purge, but what was coming up was cleaner?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Yeah, it was cleaner and cleaner. Yeah, but each day I felt like it was going deeper and deeper actually into my system. So, and each day I took, not that this is necessarily how it has to work, but each day I took a bit more and allowed more into my system. So it felt like I was scrubbing deeper, but also like less was coming up.
Yeah.
Versus more that for the first day, it was just crazy.
Wow.
And so after the 3rd day, I just said, there's no fucking way that I'm ever going to take Rogaine again.
Wow.
It's just not worth it. And so I shaved my head, and that was it. I said, I'm done with this. Cause I thought to myself, what's more important to me, my vanity or my health? And I chose my health.
Yeah.
And I just decided to own being bald, you know? And, you know, I feel fortunate because honestly, I know that I have a nice looking head. I think so. For a while I had this stance of like, just own it, dude. Like if I saw a guy that was balding, you know, I think to myself, just own it, man. Just shave your head. And I do feel like, honestly, it's easier for me because my head's in nice shape that, no, seriously, you know,
You don't look like an alien.
I don't look like an alien, and it's got to be really hard for people. I think I got really lucky, you know, and my heart really goes out to if you're a guy listening to this and you're balding and maybe you don't feel like you look good with a shaved head. My heart really goes out to you because that's a tough thing. You know, we live in a challenging society where a lot of the love and connection that we receive and the success we're able to build, a lot of it can be based on our looks. And it's a tough position to be in. It was certainly a tough position for me to be in. And if you're going through it, I just got love for you, whatever you decide, you know, but it's hard. It's a tough thing. But personally for me, I found a lot of relief in just shaving my freaking head.
Yeah. What was that like the first time you shaved it? So you've come back from the ceremony.
Yeah.
Right? And you're just looking at the razor and you're like, fuck, it's go time.
Yeah. It felt liberating.
Yeah.
It felt very liberating. But you know, after I also felt very vulnerable. And when I first met people, like I merged into, you know, different situations where people that knew me saw me for the first time with a shaved head. There was definitely I was waiting with bated breath for somebody to talk about how they perceive me, you know? And I was just sort of secretly hoping that people were going to be receptive to it and tell me that they thought that it looked good or that, you know, they thought it was a good decision. But yeah, it was definitely felt very liberating and also very vulnerable for me. Yeah. But now there used to be so much anxiety around my hair, so much thinking, you know, I had like a little bald spot in the back of my head, you know, and my hair was sitting in the front. I think in ways that I noticed more than anybody else would have. But that was constantly on my mind, you know, as a loop running in my head about this thing that I had where that made me feel inadequate that I was trying to hold on to so tightly. And so shaving it, it's just been amazing to just like let go of that fear, you know, and just accept myself for who I am, accept my body.
Yeah.
You know?
I know some women who've shaved their heads, and they also talk about how they're like, it's not only is it one less decision that I have to make, it's like, it's a whole bunch of decisions, like showering and do I dry my hair? Do I not dry my hair? Do I need product? Do I have to do this to put it up? And what's it going to look like with this? So like, it's so freeing.
It's so freeing. You know, the thing is we just do so much to be loved and accepted by other people. I mean, one of the things, I went to this festival that most of your listeners probably heard of called Burning Man. And one of the most beautiful things about that space, when I first got there, there were all these people walking around that were naked or dressed weird as shit. Just like, and I couldn't understand it when it kind of made my skin crawl. I was like, why do people have to be so out there at this place? You know, why do people get here and have to go so bananas? And what I realized is by the end of this week, and was so moving to me, was that this was the one place that people felt like they didn't have to be a certain way to be accepted by others. And it really made me realize how much of my life and time and energy I put in to doing the things that I need to do to be loved and accepted by the people around me.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
And we can all relate to that. Think about what would happen if you put on some weird clothing, right? Just really outlandish something, and you walked to meet the people that were closest to you, your loved ones, right? After maybe an initial laughter or something that you might get out of friends, if you just continued to wear something that was weird or didn't fit into the norms of society, you'd probably find that the people around you on some level, not necessarily a level of totality, in some way would reject you and not accept you based on the choice of clothing that you chose to wear. Think about some beliefs that you might hold, not to say that you have them now, but think what would happen if all of a sudden you adopted some kind of belief. Let's say it wasn't a belief that necessarily hurt anybody, right? But just a belief you had that was contradictory to that of your friend group or the people that are closest to you. And what could possibly happen to the love and acceptance that you get from the people that are closest to you, because now you've changed your mind about the way that you see the world, or maybe see it differently from them. And I've found personally, I mean, the conversation about baldness is like a microcosm for something that happens, I think, in people's lives. That a macrocosm is that I don't think we think about too often, is there are all these conditions that are placed on people's ability to accept us, even the people that are closest to us, and strangers too. You know, if you get too weird, weird's not even the right word. You get too different in your way of seeing the world, your style, even sometimes the foods that you could choose to eat. You know, I felt judgment from friends at one point when I changed my diet to a more healthy lifestyle even, or stopped drinking alcohol. There was judgment there, you know, and those are micro changes. And I think people don't realize sometimes the weight that we can all carry, because we are social creatures. We do need love and acceptance. If babies aren't held when they're born, they can literally die. I mean, we are social. We need other people to live and survive, which is why they say solitary confinement is one of the worst things that could ever happen to you.
Right.
Really think about how conditional people's love and acceptance for you in society could be. So if you are somebody who's worried about their hair, somebody who struggles with their weight, or somebody has something going on, of course it's going to be a challenging thing for you. Of course it's not as simple as, oh, just shave your head, or, you know, oh, just be more positive about your body, because there's so much of a contingency on the love that we get in this world, generally speaking.
Yeah, that's well said. I think that this idea of unconditional love is bullshit. I just don't think, I think that it might exist between parents and kids. I think, you know, you can see it with pets and stuff, but when we're really looking at partner to partner, spouse to spouse thing, like that love is conditional. It's conditional in the long run. I mean, you might have an unconditional love with someone and just decide that you don't want to be like husband and wife or wife and wife or husband and husband anymore. But the part of, I think, partnerships that stay the course, that it's conditional. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think it's fine. It's, but it's like if your girlfriend were to start doing anything that you thought was aberrant or unsafe, then that partnership is not unconditional. It's very much conditional. My relationship with Jen is conditioned upon the fact that like she's not whoring it up around town or whatever, I might still be able to find love for her, but I wouldn't necessarily choose to be with her as a partner if that's what she wanted to do.
Well, I think there's a distinction to be made there. And I agree with you about, I think the word unconditional love is thrown around a lot in situations maybe it doesn't really exist. But in that case, you can still have unconditional love for Jen and for yourself and choose maybe not to be in a partnership with her.
Right. That's well done. Yeah. So maybe it's conditional partnerships, unconditional love, but conditional partnerships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But also I say that, and I really do think that love, generally speaking, in the places that at least Western society, again, at least New York and other places that I've been through most countries, it is like, love and acceptance could be very conditional. And I think in some ways that's okay. It doesn't have to, there's no rule that says it has to be unconditional, but I think the ways that really rub me the wrong way or make me really wish that we lived in a different world are the ways that love and acceptance wouldn't exist for something you're doing that doesn't hurt anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's really well said.
Cheers, man. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, and I think that, part of it, I don't know, I look at from an anthropological perspective, there's the role of the tribe, and the tribe has to be kept safe. Like, did you read the book Sapiens?
I read part of it. I haven't completed it.
I loved it. I thought it was great. And I appreciate the arc, the long arc of the book, starting basically from the Big Bang up until present day, where, it's in order for a tribe to function, there has to be some kind of ideas of norms, and people like to gossip. So there's going to be, things that are considered normal and things that are considered aberrant. But certainly, yeah, if people's choices aren't hurting anybody, it's whatever you want, it's like, it doesn't matter. I remember when I went to Burning Man, I was reflecting on it afterwards, and I was like, I didn't have that feeling. I've only been there once. I didn't have that feeling of, I remember saying, I said, I don't feel repressed in my life, where Burning Man is the week of salvation or the week of freedom, which is awesome in that, I'm a business owner, right? You and I run into each other at Equinox at 2 p.m. Like, we figured out the ultimate life hack.
Totally. We got to tell everybody about that.
But, I've been fortunate to build a life where, I can wear whatever I want to wear to work. And if clients don't like what I'm wearing, then that's fine.
Right. Or say what you want to say on this podcast.
Totally.
A lot of people don't have that. People could lose their jobs because they hold views that are contradictory to the pervasive views of culture and society.
For sure.
That's another thing.
For sure.
And that's attached to your life. I mean, we do have freedom, but you can get fired and then fear for your ability to have a certain type of lifestyle, a home, food, things like that,
Totally.
But
I thought about that when I started this podcast. There was a potential job that was being floated around and for me, and I was like, fuck, I started the podcast. I'm talking about doing mushrooms and psychedelics, and I had a couple of things with Shonda was on here. We're talking about sex and goddess things and stuff. And I was like, this might become a liability now.
Right.
And I was like, well, it's worth the risk. I don't care. Fortunately, I can make it work. But then I remember about 6 months after Burning Man, I was thinking about it, and I was just like, maybe the roles that I've chosen to play, I've told myself I'm so comfortable with them that I haven't allowed myself to get so weird. That, I was like, maybe there's a whole other level of weirdness that if I would spend more time at Burning Man, or if I was just freeing my mind even more, cared less and less about what people thought about me, maybe I would discover a whole untapped level of out there-ness that I don't even know about.
Right. Well, totally. You probably would, Jim, You probably would. Because if you just think about who we are today, how much of it is something that you've actively chosen, and how much of it fits totally within how much of who you are today can you see related to somebody else or has been influenced by anything that you do? It's so much of who we are and the way we see the world is based on a relationality to the other things around us in our culture, you know? I can almost guarantee that you'd be a completely different person if you were raised in a completely different society that would totally dictate a lot of your propensities, likes, dislikes, wants, you know? And I think just about everybody is so conditioned that a lot of times they don't even know. I think people can really lose touch with their true nature or their true likes and dislikes. And I was so inspired when I heard about a school, and I think this is becoming more common, where gender isn't even a thing that gets, the people aren't boys and girls, and I use that term because it's, I think, like elementary schoolers or something. They're not introduced to the concept that boys and girls do different things. So a world for these kids, the way that it's been set up by their school system and by parents is that a child would have no idea that other people might consider playing the flute, for example, to be an effeminate thing, or that playing football would be a masculine thing. It's just not a paradigm that gets introduced to these children. And I think it's so interesting to see what would happen. I'm sure that my interests as a kid were dictated based on what I thought was going to get me probably more love and acceptance by others versus what naturally came to me, you know?
Yeah, my kid lives with his mom and grandparents. They moved to Indiana, kind of about an hour from Chicago. And my kid is 6 now, 6.5, and he loves to dance. Like, we'll just be sitting there watching TV or whatever, and he'll just get up and start dancing and then sit back down again. And it's amazing. And so his mom and I have been talking about getting him in dance classes. And she's like, well, there's this dance school in Chicago. You know, they've got classes there. And I was like, why are you going to drive him all the way to Chicago? And she was like, yeah, we live in Indiana now. Like, a boy going to dance class is a bit of a problem. And so it's like, you know, that's a very much a thing that he's going to have to take a look at, you know? And so her solution to that is to go to a bigger metropolitan area in Chicago. And I think we hasn't gone to the class yet. I think there might even be a boys only dance class that they do. But yeah, the whole gender stuff, it's interesting. I mean, you know, we talked about beforehand, one of the things I was going to talk to you about is how, you know, you and I both have businesses that are geared towards women. And I was sitting thinking about, you know, when you were coming over, I was like, well, that's kind of an interesting thing. But on the other hand, it's like, why is that interesting? Like, we're business owners and we're just putting out products that help people to feel empowered. And it just happens that we're men and the products we're putting out happen to be predominantly for women.
Totally. But I do think that there's something in that is inherently interesting in that, you know, because I think anytime that you see somebody doing something where they're not from the thing, you know what I mean? It's like you hear a story about like, I don't know, about like one type of animal being raised by different types of animals or something, you know what I mean? That's like always, I think, an interesting thing to us because it seems as though, for example, like we both work with women, that maybe that's outside of our true nature or like what's going on there, you know? I'm curious actually we've never really spoke about your motivations for working with women, but I'd love to hear more about what it is that you do. I don't know if I'll be boring your listeners who might have heard a lot of it before, but I'd love to know that. And also what called to you about that? What got you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so the relationship coaching, the dating coaching really just stemmed from my acupuncture practice. And so the acupuncture practice, I never marketed it for women, but women, I forget I don't know what the newest stats are, but it's something like, you know, college educated women between 25 and 65 are the biggest consumers of alternative medicine. So the majority of my practice just became female. And as part of that, you know, they would open up and I would hear all sorts of stories and their struggles. And I realized that especially for the female mind, at least that I was seeing, it seemed to be that they were hardwired to care about their relationships in a way that was just much more focused and pronounced than with men. So what that would look like is that if they had headaches, for instance, if there was a discord with their partner or with their boss or with their, you know, kind of immediate ties, that could trigger a higher level of stress that could trigger their headaches more. And so the acupuncture or the essential oils or the herbs or whatever could take the edge off or could change some of the patterning. But ultimately, we had to kind of navigate the the discord within the community, within their connections, in a way that I just didn't see with guys. I think it's there, but it doesn't rise to the top or the forefront of the mind of a man the way that I think it does for women. And so anyway, so then when I was going to get into, when I wanted to do more coaching, I was like, okay, what do I know about? And I was like, I know about women and their relationships and how to navigate that. And what I kept hearing over and over again for years in the practice was how much they appreciated having a kind of a grounded male's perspective on what was happening. And there's definitely a need for it. And especially for women that are dating, in the dating process, working with a male coach, I think is really valuable, because part of what we're trying to do is get them close to game ready for a relationship as possible. And if working with a male coach gives them an opportunity to open up and to develop the safety and the trust just of getting in the habit of sharing something in their life with a male, that removes a huge barrier of entry where they might not get that with a female coach. It's like they're used to opening up to their girlfriends most of the time.
Yes.
But now you're opening up to a male who's specifically that you've hired to help you with dating things. It becomes something a little bit different.
Right. It's safety. You can provide a safety. And that safety could be a pattern recognition for when they are in a relationship, to maybe feel a little bit safer and open up a little bit more.
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. And do you feel like there's anything, so I'm sure this would be in the intro, I have this company called Expectful. It's meditation for pregnant and new moms. And my desire to start this business, I realized after I started it, or not too long after I started, I always knew it was connected to my relationship with my mom. But I think the more that I got into it, the more I realized that my motivations for starting it were very connected to my relationship with my mom. Do you feel like any of the work you're doing has a deeper emotional connection for you, or is it purely like you feel like you have a unique capability to contribute to this part of the market, which you're already seeing in acupuncture, because most of your clients sound like they're female.
Right.
Is it like just sort of like practical, like you can meet this need and it feels good to help other people?
Yeah.
Or does it feel like there's something deeper there for you that calls you to want to work with women and help them in this realm of their lives?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, it's definitely multifaceted for sure. I mean, my parents divorced when I was a kid. I was like 12, I think, when they finally got separated or finally signed the papers. And so I was a teenager when my mom was dating. And so I saw kind of what she was going through as a single mom, also trying to build her life and nurture her emotional needs. So I definitely have a soft spot for, women that are divorced and getting back out there again, trying to sort it out. And I can see how valuable it is, when mom is happy, a lot of good things happen in the home. And if you bring in, the right kind of male energy, that, can be hugely beneficial. If you bring in the, more aggressive or unaware, unattuned male energy to the house, that's also going to have consequences for the kids.
Wow.
And then, I started doing this after I got divorced. And so that also had my mind tuned to the value of, relationships. And I learned so much in the divorce process about how I showed up, how I wasn't showing up before, what I could do differently, and just a whole other level of, kind of connection and awareness.
Yeah, totally.
And so it's nice to bring that. And I was in the dating pool again, so I was like, oh, this is what's happening out here now.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
It's of a more challenging nature.
All right.
And I'm asking you this because it's something I think about a lot myself, is there might be people listening right now, and this sort of seems to be a more common voice that's being expressed in response to things like what we're talking about, like you coaching women, which is what right do you have as a man to be stepping into this work and to think that you have the ability to help a woman, empathize with a woman, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
Purely playing devil's advocate because I respect what you're doing, but I'm curious about that because I personally think about voices like that in my own life and my own career.
Yeah, for sure. I've asked myself that question a lot. I still ask it. I think it's helpful. It's a way to stay humble. And the short answer is I don't know anything. So what qualifies me? Like, I don't know. Like, on one hand, what qualifies anybody to do anything?
Right. But is that true that you don't know anything? Because it seems like you actually have a wealth of knowledge.
I have a lot of experience. But this idea of knowledge and, what is that and what's helpful and all that, I don't really know. What I do know is that I show up, at least I think I show up in a pretty good way, and I listen really well. And I've been able to kind of read energy and sense people and identify some of the blind spots that I think people have. I've been doing it since I started the men's work, and I think I'm pretty good at that.
Totally.
And I think that there's huge value in that.
And I just want to say, I know people have worked with you who happen to agree.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's cool. But yeah, I've definitely thought that. And I've been also aware with some of these things of being extra sensitive to being a male who's telling a woman what to do.
Yes.
Where they're like, what do I do? And it's like, well, I don't really want to be telling you what to do. It's like, what do you feel you need to do? And let's talk about it that way, kind of basic coaching. But then there are some times where, I sometimes need to be a little firmer, a little bit more direct, a little more clear. And I've struggled, I think, early on in the coaching practice part of it, to find that line in a way that's not just another guy telling a woman what to do.
Totally. Yeah. I'm with you. I think it's so important to have that awareness, because there's so many different versions of reality that exist. And a big reality that people are creating is we live in a time where we're white men, you know what I mean? And there's so much that comes with that. And I think it's so important to be mindful of that fact. And really just be conscious of the impact that before anything's ever said, before anything's ever expressed, the impact that our presence can have on people in the world and how much could be projected onto our bodies, our physicality, on all of us. I mean, we were already talking about this earlier in the podcast, just the way you dress, the way you look, whether it's your style, your physical appearance, your choices, your beliefs, those things have such an impact on other people that are around you for a myriad of reasons. So I mean, it sounds like you're being really mindful about that,
Try to be. One of the things that I say a lot is like, if a woman's asking me, like, for instance, what should she text, or this is what she's thinking about doing, I would say, well, this is how that would land on me. This is how that would occur to me if you did that.
Yes.
And then we can just kind of continue that conversation from there.
Right.
And be like, can you imagine how I might feel that way if that's what I read or whatever, and that's helpful, and that's again, that's part of the thing of like the male female interaction that I think is really beneficial.
It sounds that way, yeah,
because then we can work through all of that too.
Yeah. Is there a core message that you're sending to women? If you had to sum up the main thing that you're communicating, or that you want every woman you work with to get, for the vast majority, can you boil it all down to a sentence or two? That might be unfair. I'm just curious, though. Is there a through line to everything that you seem to be teaching?
Yeah, it's the same advice that I give to men too, which is really simple. It's don't be awful. Just don't be awful. When you're on the dating apps, when you're going out in the world, when you're looking at the behavior that somebody did or didn't do and the story that you're writing, it's like, just don't be awful. Like, lead with kindness. Especially for people that have had so much trauma and they've had, a bad string of dates and interactions. It's easy to get defensive. It's easy to put up walls. It's easy to assume kind of the worst, and it's like, don't be awful to yourself. Don't be awful in the world. And then the other one is, keep a clear invitation for what it is that you're inviting into your life. It's not about seeking love. It's really about just inviting it in. Because I do believe that, I'm going to get kind of, sappy here, but I do believe that kind of the core of the universe is love, is this energy of love. And so, all we really have to do is invite in the awareness of it and then let it grow from there. It's like the saying of, if you want more love in your life, like, just be in love, be that love. And that's what you're going to continue to see a lot more of.
Yeah.
I remember we talked before you started, I was asking about the early days with Alana. And one of the things that I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, was basically you just decided that you were ready, that you were ready for something new, for kind of a new experience of love, with this new shaved head relationship with yourself. And then you went out and made it happen.
Yeah. It almost felt like it happened to me. And I had done a lot of work as well to get really intentional and clear. And I'd spent months looking at my own relationship history and who I'd attracted into my life before and why. And just really got connected with the type of partner that I wanted. I got really aligned and congruent with that. And there were all these beautiful serendipities and coincidences that led my amazing partner Alana into my life, for sure.
But you met her at the gym, right? Or wasn't there some interaction there, but you had to kind of have the courage to make a move.
Yeah, well, we met at the gym, and she was with her sister and was laughing hysterically about. So we were at the gym, and some song came on. I wish I remember the song. This song came on, and her and her sister, who I'd never met before, just started dancing and laughing.
Nice.
And they were putting out such good energy. It didn't seem like they cared about what anybody thought of them. They were just in their own world, having a great time. And I felt so compelled to go over because they just seemed like the kind of people that I'd want to be around.
Mm.
And so I introduced myself, and Alana and I and her sister spoke for a while. And I asked Alana if she was single, and she said, "No, I'm not." And I said, "Okay, well, it's a pleasure to meet you." And I went back to my workout. And then Alana left the gym, and her sister was still there, and she came over to me and she said, "Hey, listen, my sister Alana is in a relationship, but it's about to end within like the week, like literally. It's a certainty that she's getting out of this relationship. Wow. And if you give me your number, I'll wait till they break up and I'll give it to her."
That's amazing.
And so she did that. And so a few weeks later, I get a text from Alana. And at that stage, when I was in the gym, I was single, but I'd gotten in that time back together with somebody that I'd broken up with recently. And when I got Alana's text, I was back in this relationship. So I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, our stars didn't align here." And then 6-7 months went by. And then another coincidence, which was a mutual, Alana's aunt, who was our one mutual friend that connected us on Facebook, came over to me and said, "Hey, I heard you hit on my niece at the gym." And I said, "What?" And I'd actually forgotten about it. It wasn't in my conscious awareness that time. And I was newly single then when I heard this. And she said, "I heard you hit on my niece in the gym," and reminded me of what it was. And I was like, "That's your niece? What are the chances of that?" Alana existed in a completely different community than the one that I existed in. But when I found this out, and this really cool coincidence, I just made a commitment to a coach I was working with that I was going to be completely single, which, as my coach said, no snacking even. So I wasn't allowed to date anybody, kiss anybody, nothing.
Yeah.
I just literally made that commitment either that same day or the day before. I really have to look it up. So when I found out about this, I really wanted to reach out to Alana. Yeah. But I made this commitment, and I promised my coach that, all right, we're going to go deep on all my relationship history and past. Wow. And so I spent about 2.5 months diving in with my coach, wrote down every single relationship I'd ever been in, what happened, what worked, what didn't, how my mom and dad's relationship was in some way manifesting itself in my relationships. Sure. And got super clear on what I wanted and what I didn't want. And then after 2.5 months, finally my coach said, "All right, Mark, you're ready to date again, but make sure you don't do this and you look for this." And I said, "Okay." And that same day I called Alana. I reached out. She's the only person I wanted to get in touch with. Yeah. And we started dating shortly thereafter, and the rest is about a year into it, and the rest is history.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like to dive into with my clients is their, what I call like a limiting belief about, I'll say, what is a long-term committed relationship? When you think about that, what are limiting beliefs about that? Or like what's scary about that? Or what's the first thing that come to mind? Like I had one client, I was like, "What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear me say, imagine yourself in a long-term committed relationship?" And she said, "Compromise." And I was like, "No wonder you're not motivated to get in a relationship. That sounds like a horrible life." It's a valuable thing when you're in the relationship, but like as a motivation, or if that's the outcome that your brain is associating with it, it's tough.
Totally. Just like we were talking about all the meaning that gets projected on style, beliefs, physicality, et cetera, et cetera. Think about the world of perception and belief that we built up since we were children. And the word relationship, it's not just a word, it's a world. When you think about that, and you add long-term committed relationship, that can bring a lot of things up for a lot of people. And I think it's so smart of you to examine that, because you might find that it might seem like, long-term committed relationship, without really getting in touch with the feelings experienced. You just say, I want that. Yeah. But then you start to unpack that. What does a long-term committed relationship mean to you? Right. You might find that people have an association with things like compromise, pain, suffering, anxiety, abandonment. And I think it's so important to really get in touch with those things and figure out what's true for you. Yeah. Because I think a lot of times, and I find this with men's work, I'm experiencing it all the time myself and the men that I'm in this room with, is there's so many things in life that we've just perceived one way that doesn't serve us, Yeah. So it sounds like I love that one of the two things that your main core concepts is like, let's actually see what that means, you know, because how you feel about it is going to dictate how it manifests in your life.
For sure. So was there a big, did you have anything for you that was like a limiting belief or like the one thing that you were focused on? Like for instance, when I got divorced and I started dating again, I was like, it was crystal clear. I said, the number one thing that I'm looking for is kindness, is to be with a woman who's kind. And as part of that, I knew that I had to be kind. I had to show up with that as like the primary intention. And I think I did a pretty good job.
Huh. Yeah, I see that in you for sure.
Yeah.
And Jen too, your partner, you picked well. A limiting belief. Yeah, you know, I think that in my relationship, one thing that I realized is that because of my own childhood and experiences that I had as a kid, there was an unconscious belief that whoever I was with was going to leave me. And that was such a huge thing to grapple with.
Yeah.
At times I still do. I mean, we're a year into it and it's been amazing that sometimes I'll feel like I am my worst, most unlovable self and I'll be with this partner who's just there.
Yeah.
Who loves me.
Yeah.
And it's really helped me rewrite a lot of these super limiting beliefs that I think that I'd had, but I think that was a really common one.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. So it's amazing. This is the first relationship I've ever been in where I'm growing inside the relationship.
Nice.
Versus outside after the relationship ends and doing all the growth.
Yeah.
So
awesome. So let's kick it back to Expectful. But I saw that, so you guys, you do meditations, right? It's an app. It's a meditation for pregnant women.
Yeah. So if any of the listeners know like Headspace or Calm, which are meditation apps, we're like that, but for women that are trying to conceive pregnant and new moms. And soon to be dads too. We're going to be rolling out a library for fathers as well.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to ask you about right now, which was, I saw you posted on Facebook, you know, you were kind of crowdsourcing. What are the issues that came up for new dads? Did anything stand out in particular that, you know, or any themes?
Yeah, so to give the listeners some context, I posted on Facebook because we're are launching this fatherhood library and we're trying to figure out the topics to cover that would be most pertinent to fathers and to their wives, because we're also looking out for them. We want to introduce topics that support women. And so I put up this Facebook post and I also put out a survey to some of our users as well to get feedback from men and women about the things that they wanted to see in a library. One of the most common things we heard from women was they want to have men empathize and understand their situation and what they're going through. And also women were really wanting tools for better communication between them and their partners.
Sure.
Very common thing, very common for the preparing to conceive journey, preconception. That could be very challenging if it's not happening right away. So people really wanted empathy there. And also, especially in the postpartum and new parenthood arena. Another common thing was for men that both men and women reported, but a lot of men were asking for things that help them deal with frustration and anger and feelings of overwhelm that they experience, which I'm not a father, but it seems to be a very common thing that dads experience when they have their child is that, and I see you, it looks like you even got emotional when I said that, that men experience. Well, maybe you could speak to that about your experience with maybe some of those emotions when you became a father.
Yeah, it's just so much, you know, it's like, it's so hard to anticipate, you know, things just kind of pivot in unexpected ways. And, yeah, you know, you hear the stuff of, you know, the fatigue and the sleepless nights and all this stuff. But when you're in it, it's like it can be a different thing, you know? Yeah, it's overwhelming. One of the things that I talk about to guys that are expecting is, you know, if it takes you 6 months or a year to bond with your kid, it's totally fine.
Yes.
You know, like you can't expect to have a relationship with your kid the way that you're the mother of your child does.
That's another thing we hear though, is that a lot of women don't necessarily experience that overwhelming sense of instant maternal love for their child.
Right,
you know?
Which is a huge source of shame and guilt for them.
Huge. It's one of the reasons for postpartum depression.
Yeah.
We're creating a whole library for postpartum, and we worked with this amazing group of women in New York City called the Motherhood Center, where they are some of the leading experts on postpartum depression and research around it, and a lot of lobbying that took place to help advanced screenings for depression pre and postnatally. Amazing women I have so much respect for. And we created content with them. And then one of the things that we talk about, we have a whole journey of a 5-part series of meditations, or 5-part meditation series, in which one of the things that we discuss in that is like, hey, it's totally normal not to feel instantly bonded with your baby.
Yeah.
And you might actually feel anger or resentment or imprisonment to this child because you have lost a lot of your sovereignty and freedom temporarily to take care of this human life. And there are mixed emotions that come with that. And it's okay to feel both like this was the best decision you ever made in your life and the worst one at the same time. And so, yeah, I think men feel that. Not every woman feels that, but plenty of women do, apparently.
Yeah.
And I think it's all about, it goes back to just giving ourselves permission to be okay with whatever we're feeling, you know, and really having that be like, all right, like, you know, you don't have to feel a certain way that other people have projected on you, a way you think that you should feel, so you do get loved and accepted by the people around you.
Yeah. That's such powerful work. It's so valuable what you're doing and putting out there.
Oh, thanks, man.
Those conversations are so great. And it's, you know, like I posted in the response to your question, one of the things that I would love too is like a meditation, you know, kind of a hypno preparing for birth that is inclusive of the husband and wife or the partnerships, you know, because I listened to her, she was listening to a hypno birthing thing. And I was just like, wow, this is like a really solitary experience. It's like you were in a room by yourself doing this thing. I was like, there's no talk about, you know, feeling your husband's hand or, you know, like feeling that, or, you know, there was no other kind of context that was there. But yeah, it's a lot, man. It's just a whole thing having a kid, you know? And I think there's the sense of responsibility, you know, where it's just like, wow, they're so helpless and there's so many variables and life is a dangerous and threatening place. And it's your job to keep it safe, you know, and all of that stuff stacked on top of the bills and the job and the coworker and, you know, being out of diapers in the middle of the night and, you know, it's all the stuff.
It's wild. And, you know, I think from what I understand, a lot of things can come up for men and women too, that they just don't even realize what's going on. So for me, I fell in love with Alana and all of a sudden I started to experience extreme anxiety. But I had no idea why.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, okay. In my past, there were things that happened to me that led me to have the unconscious belief that when I got close to somebody that they were going to leave me. Right? So I think what happens a lot of times for men and women, we're unconscious of our own relationships with our mothers and our fathers and our traumas and things that happened when we were a child. And all of a sudden, our emotional body is going crazy. And there's just not even an understanding of why or even what's happening in the first place. And I think it takes a lot of time, which people get really short on when they're new parents, you know, and introspection, people get really short on that when they're new parents, to figure out what it is, you know, which obviously I believe, you know, I'm biased, but I really think that meditation is a tool that can really help with that when you, when you take the time to really focus in on that, especially with guided meditations that are made specifically for, hey, you're feeling angry, listen to this. And within that is going to be embedded some questions you might be able to ask yourself to get in touch with the source of these things. And usually once you're able to see these things and identify them, they become less scary, you know, because you understand what's happening and what might lead to those feelings. Yeah.
And like the men's groups too. I'm being able to go back to some close people, you know, and just be like, hey, this is what's coming up for me. This is what I'm aware of. The other thing too, I've joked about this before on the podcast, but it's, you know, when a kid is born, all of a sudden there's all these variables, stuff that I never thought that I had a stance on, that I had a feeling about until all of a sudden you see it being done differently. You know, it was like, we used to get in arguments about Wyatt's socks all the time. You know, she wanted him to have socks on. And I was like, he doesn't need socks. It's totally fine. And I was like, what the fuck? We're arguing about socks.
Totally.
And it goes back to get to the advice I try to follow now. It's like, don't be an asshole. Like, don't be a dick, you know, just don't be awful. Be kind, you know? And so it's like the more things that lengthen the fuse, to be kind as you know, to give it some time to get some perspective on what's going on. Like, hopefully there hasn't been too much damage done in the interim, you know, where you guys can still be nice to each other so that there's not as much to unravel down the road.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, my girlfriend and I have this, this tool we use to have challenging conversations with each other. We call it the avocado. And so I found that I think partly because I have in the past had this fear of my partner leaving me, that it's hard for me to bring up things that are uncomfortable because the stakes for me are so much higher, you know? And so we developed this word that I think could help a lot of people actually. It's like a code word, avocado, which means, hey, I have something challenging that I want to share. And using that word in different ways. One, it's a funny word, avocado. If you think of an avocado, it's sort of like it's like this friendly fruit, or this friendly produce, you know? And we would say, I have a big avocado, or many times, like, I have the tiniest avocado, I have a little avocado, you know?
Yeah.
And something about that helped, just having that tool and that mental model to just disarm it.
Yeah.
And it makes the other person, it makes it so you're less just coming at steamrolling somebody with like, hey, this bothered me, or hey, this rubbed me the wrong way, you know, or like, hey, I need to talk to you. Hey, I have something I have to tell you.
Yeah.
You know, an avocado is it's like there's kindness in it. It's like, I want to share something with you, but I'm mindful that this might affect you in some way, shape, or form, but I want to share it because it's important.
Yeah.
And that's been just such a cool tool to express things that might otherwise be harder to express. But we have a rule where if something's coming up that we feel like scared to share, then we know it has to be.
Yeah.
We have to say it. It's an avocado now, and it exists. And I found that it's actually it's developed such a great intimacy between Alana and I, because there are a lot of things that I normally might not have shared or shied away from, or didn't feel totally justified in feeling, but yet I felt that now I share because of this one mindfulness around it, which is the biggest aspect. But this cool little tool, the avocado. Yeah. My buddy Brian got me Alana and I a stuffed avocado.
Yeah, that's great.
The other day. I really appreciated that.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, it's something that I just think is such a valuable conversation, because people, at least that I see, the singles in particular, especially if you've been burned, it's like, you know, they're craving safety. They're craving safety. And like, one, safety is an illusion. And two, it seems to be something that's real. You know, it's like, you know, when you're safe, and it's also like all an illusion, but you know, the step is with vulnerability first. You know,
what do you mean? Like, I think I know what you mean when you say it's all an illusion, but can you expand on that?
Yeah, it's like, you know, so take someone who's anxious, and they tend to have an anxious attachment style. But in the relationship, they meet some new guy, and the guy has texted when he said he's going to text. He's shown up when he says he's going to show up. He hasn't canceled plans. He might even commit to her and say, you know, we're committed, we're monogamous, and whatever, right? All of those things give the illusion of safety. You know, she might feel more comfortable and relaxed. He might be married. You know, he might have a whole other life that's happening, and yet he's done everything the way that it should be done. And so, you know, what is safety? You know, or maybe he means all those things, and he is those things. He's committed, and he's in it, and all of those things. And he's that way for 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. And then all of a sudden something happens, he hits his head, he just changes his mind. Something changes. You know, the safety shifts, you know. And so it's not to say that you weren't unsafe before, but it's just all, I think going into a relationship knowing that there is always a possibility that can end, and getting used to that. It will end.
That's
exactly.
The thing. It's
right.
One way or another,
it's going to end. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, Jordana Jacobs, she was on the podcast, that her work with the familiarity of dying, you know, it's like, you don't get comfortable with dying by pretending it's not going to happen. You know, it's like the more we can recognize that it's there, and then bring that kind of vigor and the joy to life as we recommit to each other, to celebrate and to be safe and to have a good time. You know, there's huge impact there. But not to confuse that just because he says he's done everything that he says he's going to do, you know, like the safety that people are really looking for is internal. You know, it's that commitment to themselves. Like, you know, I like to think that sometimes I think that the greatest sort of abandonment that can happen is when we actually abandon ourselves. You know, and we do that in all sorts of ways. The story that we tell ourselves, or not checking in with ourselves, or going on a bender, or whatever. You know, there's lots of ways that we abandon ourselves. Yeah. And it's that betrayal that I think is the most dangerous. And so, you know, I love the avocado stuff, because it's like when we take that step to be vulnerable, there's like a commitment to ourselves in that. We're the risk to share is one that we're diving into ourselves and saying, I'm here with me. I'm not abandoning myself. I'm not tuning out. I'm actually diving into this scary ass pool of myself. And now I'm going to, enroll someone else in this kind of conversation. And then the kind of the intimacy or the depth that's possible in the relationship, it comes after the sharing, not before.
Yes.
And I see a lot of people want it before as a permission to then go deep. And it's like, no. You go deep. And then you get that feeling of like, oh, this is okay. This wasn't so horrible. Or this person is still here, And part of why that person is still there is because you're still with yourself. And you've kept the invitation for them to be in your life or to connect. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. I for sure. Like the closest Alana and I, the times that we've been the closest are the times that we've been vulnerable with each other.
Yeah.
And the vulnerability came first.
Yeah. It has to.
Yeah.
It has to.
It's wild, but there's so many things in life that work the opposite way of the way that you would think that they do.
Uh-huh.
And I think vulnerable sharing or sharing something that maybe you're scared to or ashamed to, you think you're scared it's going to push the other person away. But a lot of times I found with the right person, it brings them closer.
Yeah. And especially when it's delivered in a way that's an invitation. It's part of what I like about the avocado thing is that it's kind of like sending an invite. You're like, hey, here's an invitation to a conversation.
Totally.
Instead of a surprise party.
That's right.
It's like, here's the invitation to the party.
That's
it
right.
can happen now or it can happen, later or tomorrow. But there's a party that I'd love to have you attend.
Absolutely. It's been fascinating too in our community. I think we're really big on rituals, and a lot of people they have all these rituals. And I said to Alana that I wanted to do this thing that I'd done in previous relationships where we would pick a time once a week to sit with each other and ask each other, connect with each other. So meditate together, eye gaze, share things we're grateful for about each other, and then ask each other questions. And the most important one being, hey, is there anything that you've been wanting to say that you've been afraid to or haven't felt like you had the time or space to? Among other things. Like, what's your biggest fear right now and how can I support you? Things like that.
Yeah.
And it's not an uncommon thing for people I know to do that or to set up some kind of ritual in their relationship where they're doing something like that. And I told Alana before the avocado existed that this was something that I wanted. And she was like, no way, man. She was just like, I need to know that I'm with a man who isn't waiting for a day or doesn't need to rely on a day to share something difficult with me. And I'm with you to ride the waves of life and I'm with you to feel you, to be real with you, to, to really do this thing together and be in relationship to each other. And I don't want to wait for a day where we could have these conversations, which is such a cool, at first it bugged me a little bit. I'm like, why can't we have this day where it feels safe for me to share stuff like this? And I actually do think it's incredibly valuable. But I think also Alana has such a tremendous point of, she created a space for me where I felt really safe, where she said, every day should be a day where we're having conversations like that, And some days are harder than others. We have busy lives and schedules, but she's like, I want to be in that kind of relationship with you.
Yeah.
To allow the ebb and flows of life, So I think that's pretty cool.
That's amazing. That's amazing. How does she feel about you owning a business and running a business that supports women?
Great. She's so supportive of it. It's awesome. Yeah. She's really done a great job of encouraging me because I think, I was asking you some questions.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Because I've been challenged by those things myself. And early in my career when I started Expectful. So the reason that I started Expectful is because meditation completely changed my life. And I started to think a lot about my purpose in the world. And I had another business that I set up to be this lifestyle business. And my whole goal was being able to make money and be anywhere in the world, doing whatever I wanted to do. Not whatever I wanted to be able to work from anywhere in the world and not be too encumbered by location and with time. I wanted freedom of time and location.
Sure.
And I created that for myself. And once I reached that point in my life, I had this company in the medical space, medical device space, or durable medical equipment. And it felt really empty. And so I started thinking about why that was. And I realized it's because I built the business to just, for me, it was all focused on me. And I'd started a not-for-profit with a friend that fed elementary school kids in the Philippines lunches who wouldn't always have the means for lunch at their school. And there was nothing in that for me monetarily, yet that was one of the best times I've had. It lit me up so much. I was filled with a sense of aliveness and passion. And so I thought that, maybe what's missing is a sense of purpose here. And I started thinking a lot about what that purpose would be, and meditation was so aligned with me, and it made such a big difference in my life that I knew I'd like to contribute in that space. But there were already some great apps out there, amazing teachers that were already out there. And
right.
I didn't think I could make a novel contribution in that area the way that I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And that led me ultimately to find all this research that nobody was talking about that shows. I looked up how meditation affected children, found a little bit on that, and the breadcrumbs led down this path where I started searching for how meditation affects pregnant women and affects a pregnancy in a child and a baby at its earliest stages of development. And I couldn't find much online, and that surprised me because it seemed like such an intuitive practice.
Right.
So I hired a PhD student. I had her look into all the available research on the subject of meditation during pregnancy.
Yeah.
And I read through the studies, and I was shocked that the research showed not only can meditation really help with a pregnancy and do all sorts of things like reduce preterm birth and postpartum depression and increase feelings of connection with the baby and reduce a ton of other risk factors like adult heart disease, diabetes, substance abuse, you name it, long ADD, long list. But also stress and anxiety has an enormous impact on the child. And I got really connected with that because my mom struggled with anxiety and depression when I was growing up, and to this day, and she's in an amazing place in her life right now, but it still takes antidepressants. And I started thinking about how different my life might have been and my mom's life might have been if she had a tool like meditation to support her. And also realized that emotional health and mental health were by far the most neglected part of pre- and postnatal care. Just nobody was doing anything for these things. When a woman conceives, generally speaking, all the focus is put on her body. What are you eating? What are you consuming? Make sure you don't eat these foods. Take these vitamins.
Right.
But nobody's talking about her mental and emotional health.
Sure.
Even though her mental and emotional health can have as significant of an impact on the baby as her nutrition.
Yeah.
And so that just shocked me. And it was wild to hear about how a baby will develop in completely different ways based on the messages that it's getting from outside the womb and the world it thinks it's getting into. And if a baby thinks that it's getting into a dangerous world, which gets decoded by the baby, stress gets decoded as dangerous world, what happens is more of the baby's taking more of mom's resources into its system and dedicating it to its fast twitch muscle system instead of its vital organs.
Wow.
And baby is also taking the resources that are coming to it and less are going to develop the parts of the brain that are responsible for intelligence and focus. And instead, the parts of the brain that are responsible for hypervigilance and hyperactivity get developed.
Wow.
Because in a world that a baby's getting into where it thinks it's in danger,
Sure.
it has to fight.
Yeah.
It has to be hypervigilant. And a healthy organ system and a mind that's built for higher intelligence won't keep it alive as long. Conversely, if a baby thinks it's getting into a safe world, more resources go to the vital organs, go into the heart and the other organs in the body to help keep it alive for longer. And more resources go to the part of the brain that's responsible for developing intelligence.
Cool.
And so I read about that. I was just like, gosh, nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
Like it was wild. I mean, it was this, how is nobody talking about this? That's huge. That has such an enormous impact on the health of a child. Why is this not like a thing that's out there? So
Yeah.
I thought a lot about it. I had lots of conversations with my mom, with other women and their experiences. And I was just like, wow, this should be in the world, you know?
Yeah.
And so I launched it. And at first it was just a web app that, 8 meditations. It's kind of more of a passion project than a business or startup.
Right.
And within a very short period of time, we had a bunch of users on the platform and a bunch of people asking for an app. And so that led us to raise a small bit of money to build a team and put something in the iOS store. And it's been a wild journey. Today, we're doing research at 2 major universities on the impact meditation could have on pregnancy and parenthood and children. Wow. And we have an amazing team and almost 100,000 Instagram followers and a ton of over 100,000 podcast downloads and hundreds of thousands of meditations that have been listened to on the platform so far. And
nice.
Yeah, brochures and Western doctors' offices that are now recommending meditation. And it's been such a cool journey. And I built it with a fair bit to go back to the original question, with some anxiety about how people would perceive me and judge me.
Sure.
For being a guy that started a business like this. But, I realized that I've been paying a lot of attention to the Me Too movement and everything that's happening there. And I think there's just incredible things that are happening and that I'm really grateful for. The pendulum swinging really far to a direction that I think makes people feel unsafe, but I think it needs to. When I say people, I think men now are feeling unsafe, but okay. Like that, I think maybe needs to happen now to get it into people's awareness and consciousness about what's been happening. But one of the best pieces of advice that I've heard from men is just listen. Just listen. And I've had actually a great sense of peace knowing that Expectful came out of me just being with women and surrounding myself with strong women and listening to what they had to say and putting this out into the world. And so being a guy who has this business, I'm really at peace because what I'm doing is actually taking the advice. Who am I to do this? I'm the guy who's doing what most people are asking men to do, which is just to listen. So I've listened, and based on what I've heard, I've created something to help women that they're asking for, which is a resource to help support them emotionally. And we continue to do that when this postpartum library that's emerging, we have a library that's going to be emerging in the platform for miscarriage to help support women during that time. Those are two areas that everybody's saying, if you listen closely enough, you don't have to listen too closely, it's out there. There's a lack of support in these areas for women, and we're going out of our way to create that. Same thing with the fatherhood library. A lot of women felt very alone, like all the focus is on them when they conceive, and that dads almost don't even matter, even though the father is greatly responsible for the woman's emotional state and state of mind. And it's almost impossible to have a positive state of mind if your partner doesn't, like you were alluding to.
Right.
So I've had a great deal of peace around that, knowing that, I'm not just imposing on the world and on women what I think is right, but I'm really, what do you have to say? Everything we've built and done is based upon feedback we're getting from people where they're sharing what they want. And all I'm doing is being a steward of that and helping create that with the highest level of integrity possible.
Awesome. Nice, dude.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's been a good journey. It's been a good journey. Feels good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So how do people find you?
Find me on, good question. Find Expectful at expectful.com or in the App Store.
Okay.
Find me on Instagram at Mark Krassner. If you feel compelled to email me, I'm mark@expectful.com. Yeah, those would be the simple tools. And Expectful, we have a great Instagram channel if you love babies. So we're at Expectful on Instagram too. And we have a podcast that is hosted by my colleague, Anna Gannon, who's amazing.
Nice.
Where she interviews all sorts of interesting people about their parenthood journey. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Great to be here, dude. I love
awesome.
all the different twists and turns our conversation has had.
Yeah, that's what I like to do here.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work, everybody out there. Check out Mark and Expectful. Dude, you crushed it, brother.
We'll
have to do this again.
Yeah, dude. This is awesome.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll check you next time.